Welcome to another AIP tutorial. In this episode, we're going to be showing you some text animation techniques that, well, don't take a lot of effort, but look like they were done with a lot of effort. All right, let's get to it. So here we have this simple animation. It pops into existence, and then it transforms into something else, and then disappears into a liquidy puff of smoke. So we're going to recreate this. Now all this can be set up in just a matter of minutes. Honestly, you could come up with it, you could have this final result in just a few minutes. All right, so let's get started with creating a new composition. I'm going to call this one main comp. For this, I'm going to be doing 23.976 for the frame rate, and duration, we're going to make it 10 seconds, but we're not going to use the full 10 seconds. We're just going to have a little wiggle room. All right, so then we just hit OK. So now we want to set up our actual graphic. So I'm just going to create a new text layer by right-clicking down here, going to New, Text, and I'm going to type in Lazy Animation. Yeah, there we go. So what I want to do is go up to the Align panel, and I'm just going to align this to the center. There we go. So now what we can do is take this text layer and duplicate it by hitting Command D. So then we can double-click on this layer, and now before we do that, let's turn off the bottom one, and let's double-click on that layer again, and we'll type in Done Creatively. There we go. So what we want to do is actually kind of make it so that these two text layers are about the same width. Now, if we turn them both on, you can see that that is not a thing that is happening. So what we can do is take the tracking, kind of bring this in a little bit, maybe bring up the lazy animation tracking, and we just want to pretty much get that. It doesn't need to be perfect at all. All right, so we're all set up for this. Now we need to create our actual shape layer. So what I'm going to do is make sure that our rounded rectangle tool is selected, which it is. If I double click it, it will automatically create that shape. So when we do this, we want to make sure that nothing is selected down here, and then double click, and now you have our shape. Now it's just taking up the whole screen. That's fine for now. So let's take our fill. Let's click on the word fill right here, and then click on this little icon to give it no fill. So if we open up our rectangle 1, and then go to rectangle path 1, we can change some of our settings like the size and the roundness, and that's what we're going to do. So let's start bringing the size down. Let's take the roundness and bring that up. Now, after a certain point, you can keep going and going with this number and get higher and higher, but nothing will happen. At a certain point, there's just a threshold where you can't round the corners anymore. So we're going to bring it up to that point. There we go. There we go. That's a better number to have. All right, so let's continue to bring this down to size. Now, right now, I'm just going with eyeing up the width of it. I'm just going to bring that in. Now, we want to bring in the y-axis, or the up and down. So what we can do is turn off constrained proportions, so that way we can edit them separately, and we shall. Maybe we'll go with something like this. All right, so moving on. What we're going to do is actually name this to Stroke Graphic. All right, so let's duplicate that by hitting Command D, and let's call this one Fill Graphic. I'm butchering the typing, but I'm going to leave it that way. Haha, what are you going to do? Fire me. So for our fill graphic, what we're going to do is click on the little icon next to the fill. And is it okay? There we go. So throughout this whole process, the order of layers will be important. So we want to take our fill graphic, all right, and that's going to be attached to our lazy animation. So we actually want to bring this below that layer. So what we're going to do is cut lazy animation out of our fill graphic. And the way we can do that is making sure that our lazy animation layer is on top, and we can go to the track matte of the fill graphic and set that to alpha inverted matte lazy animation. As you can see, if I turn on transparency grid, we actually have a transparency. It's actually cut out. So we're going to turn these back on. So what I want to do is basically take these layers and organize them into nice, neat little boxes called Precompositions. So lazy animation and fill graphic, we'll select those. Hit Shift Command C. All right, so we're going to call this Lazy PC for Precomposition, and we're going to hit OK. So let's take our other layers, our stroke and our Done Creatively, and let's do the same, Shift Command C, and we'll call this Creative PC. Now we have just two layers to work with. All right, let's turn off our transparency grid. Now, I'm not going to really go into specifics like timing and getting the settings exactly right, because honestly, the settings and the timing is all going to change depending on your specific needs for that project or the graphic that you're working on. All right, so we're going to go to about 2 seconds in, and we're going to select both our creative and lazy PC, and we're going to hit T to bring up the opacity. Now let's create a keyframe for both of them, but let's set our creative PC to 0. Now let's go to about 3 seconds and let's swap those. So creative goes to 100, lazy goes to 0. So we have this very fun animation happening right here. Now this next technique that I'm going to show you is actually, it drives the whole entire animation. So it's important that we get this step out of the way now. All right, so what we want to do is create a new adjustment layer. Right off the bat, we're going to call this Blobify. Now this is a technique that I learned many years ago from Adrian Jensen of Production Crate. I don't think the original video that I watched is even in existence anymore because I tried looking for it, but that's where I got this from. So what we want to do is on top of our Blobify, let's go to Effects and Presets. Let's put on a Fast Box Blur. Okay, that's under Blur and Sharpen. Let's add that to Blobify. And for now, let's turn this radius up to, I don't know, 6. So on top of our Fast Box Blur, let's add a Levels. And that's under Color Correction, Levels. Add that on top here. So we're going to switch the channel from RGB to Alpha. This way we can edit the Alpha channel. So what we're going to do, see this guy in the middle right here? We're going to move all these triangles right to that center. We're going to put them right up close to each other. So if we go back here, we can see that we have kind of like a rounded, blobby look. If you notice, it's very jagged on the edges. So we're going to make sure that we have this crappy, aliased, jagged edge. All right. Now, this new technique that I just learned was actually from Texture Labs, where they demonstrated this same technique of adding the Fast Box Blur and Levels to create a blobby animation. But what they did was different. They put a roughen edges in there. And what they did was they just took the fractal influence and turned that down to 0. And it cleans up your lines. The cool thing is, we can go up to our blur radius, and we can control how blobby it is. I'm going to go with 8 on this one, on this specific one, because we still have, our letters are still legible. All right, so if we turn this up, you can see our letters just kind of mush and turn into nothing. All right, so what this is doing, if we look at this from an alpha perspective, what's transparent and what you can see, we're thinking of this not as a black and white image, but something that tells you what is visible and what's not visible. Black being invisible, white being visible. So it's taking that and it's blurring it and it's creating a gradient from visible to invisible. Then when we add our levels and crunch that alpha, it creates a nice solid line. So I like to bring it usually to the middle. It keeps everything about the same size and everything like that. And then the roughen edges, it's just there to take away that nastiness. So it's a pretty cool, useful, and powerful effect. So we're going to do more with this. Now we want to do the kind of intro here. Whoa, but hey, before we get to that, I want to show you some stuff that I got planned coming out soon. When? I don't know, but here's the stuff. I'm going to start actually doing motion graphics in Blender as well as After Effects. There's just some neat things that you can do in Blender that you can't do in After Effects. So I'm going to be starting showing you that. We're also going to be creating the star in Blender. Oh, look at that. That looks cool. Over in the Making Stuff and Things section of the channel, I'm going to be releasing a new build video where I make this derelict ghost from the Destiny video game franchise. But don't worry, we're still going to be doing After Effects tutorials. Hey, look at this lava animation. I mean, there's other stuff coming out, but this is just a little taste. Hit the subscribe button if you want to get notified when they come out, because I don't know, because my life is chaos, but I don't even know when they come out. Back to the episode. So let's create a new adjustment layer. We're going to call this Disp for Turbulent Displace. What we want to do is add our Turbulent Displace. All right, so that's under Distort, Turbulent Displace. Let's put that on our Disp. For this, I'm going to leave the size at about 100, and the amount I'm going to turn up to maybe like 95. What I'm going to do now is turn the complexity. We're going to bump that up all the way to 3. Now remember what I said earlier about layer order being extremely important here. All right, so our Turbulent Displace needs to go below our Blobify. Something's happening right now that I don't really enjoy. When the graphic comes on, we want the letters and everything to be kind of like an amorphous blob that doesn't have a shape and then turn into something that has a shape. But right now we can see pretty much our letters. We know what these letters are. I mean, to a certain extent. Like here's your A, you got your Z, your Y. We don't want that. So if we take our Turbulent Displace and we just pop that under our Blobify, there we go. Now we have more blobby-like structures. So what we're going to be animating for this part is the amount. So let's create a keyframe in the amount, and I have this set to 104. You can mess around with however you want, you know? Now we got it at 128. Try to keep up. All right, so we're going to go to 1 second, and we're going to set this amount to 0. So this is fine. This is fine. You can keep this if you want, but I don't want. So we're going to take our lazy PC, and we're going to hit S to bring up the scale. And I'm going to set this to 0, and then create a keyframe. Now I'm going to go to 1 second. Now what we can do here, this is neat, a neat little trick that I can show you. If we click on Turbulent Displace and hit U, that'll bring up the keyframes. Now we can take our playhead and move it around, but if we hold down Shift, we can snap it to certain things, like say this keyframe right here, snaps right to it. All right, so let's take our scale and bring that up to 100% at this second keyframe under Turbulent Displace. There we go. Now it's kind of forming a little bit better. I like it. All right, so now we have our intro and our swapping. What I want to do for the end of this is make it turn into a kind of puff of liquid smoke. Now, the reason why the lazy animation has the solid fill and the last part has the stroke and not a fill is because that's how this effect will work. If we try to do it with, the fill layer, it would pretty much look like this, a blob. But we want something different, wispy and smoke-like. All right, so let's go to 3 seconds, or roughly 3 seconds, doesn't need to be exact. And we're gonna add another keyframe on our amount for our Turbulent Displace. And let's go to maybe about 4.5 seconds, and let's turn this up. Now already you can see that we got this kind of smoke-like thing, but that's not enough. It doesn't look like smoke, it looks like it's just deforming. So what we can do, if we go to our creative PC and we hit S, for the scale, we can add a keyframe right at the 3 second mark at the beginning of this animation. And then we'll go to the second keyframe, and we're just going to turn this up till it, about reaches the edge of the screen, or the edge of our composition rather. So now we have something that's not only turning into smoke, but it's growing. Now it's dissipating from a certain point and moving outwards like smoke would tend to do. Now, another thing we could do is hit T to bring up the opacity. Now, if you want to bring up both the scale and the opacity, we can hit T and then hit Shift S, and that will bring up both properties at the same time. All right, opacity. So let's go to the end of the animation, and let's turn the opacity down to 0. So that way it grows, but at the same time it dissipates. Now we can move this out a little bit if we want. And also, if we want, we can add some easy easing to all these keyframes. So actually what I want to do is select all the layers and just hit U and then hit U again. And it'll bring up all the keyframes. We can just select all of them and right click, go to Keyframe Assistant, go to Easy Ease. That'll just kind of ease into the in and out of the animations like the name suggests. Let's go to about here and hit N on the keyboard. That'll shorten our composition. We can even go up to Composition, Trim Comp to Work Area. So that way we don't have to deal with all the extra space. So let's make this more interesting, kind of like a bonus part of the episode. Let's take all of our layers, Shift selecting, and let's hit Shift Command C to pre-compose that. And what we're going to do is we're going to call this graphic color. I'm going to select everything from this underscore to graphic, Command C to copy it. This is going to make things easier. All right, so now what we want to do is add a fill to our graphic color. Fill. That is under Generate Fill. Let's add that on top. All right, so now we have this red. All right, so I'm going to go to my libraries and I'm going to just select this. We'll make it the same as the demo, this lavender color. So what we're doing, let's explain what we're doing. You see that we have kind of depth to our animation. We have a lighter version and a darker version, and it gives it the effect of like an extrusion, like it has depth. And this is done procedurally. All right, so we have our graphic color, and this is going to be just our basic color. So now we're going to add a stroke, and we're not going to do that by going into layer styles, stroke, and all that. We're going to make it a completely separate layer. So what we're going to do is duplicate our graphic color, Command D, and let's just change the name. I'm going to paste the graphic and we'll type in stroke. So what I'm going to do is turn off our transparency grid so that we can actually see, because our stroke is going to be a darker color. Oh, I see what happened. I didn't duplicate the actual layer, I duplicated the fill effect. Don't want to do that. So we're going to take our fill on our stroke and we're going to turn that down, make it darker. I don't know, something like a dark purple. I still want to keep some of that purplishness in there. So we can just hit OK. So now what we want to add is a Minimax. And that's under Channel Minimax. Now what we're going to do with this is if we change the channel to color and alpha and then raise the radius, that'll actually expand the alpha channel. So for now, I'm going to set this to about 3. So now on top of this, we're going to add a CC composite. And that's under channel, CC composite. What we've done is we added a fill and a minimax to expand the alpha. So now what we need to do is basically cut out our original graphic from this stroke layer. So we can do that with a CC composite. So right now this is set to in front under composite original. We can set that to silhouette alpha, and it's going to take the alpha information from the original stroke layer and subtract it from this layer. So basically what we're left with is an outline. So I'm going to bring this down to about 2. I like to keep it a little thinner. So now let's take both of these layers and duplicate them. Boop. And we're going to take both of them and move them down below. Now we can just leave this at stroke 2 and color 2, but what we want to do is change the color. So I'm going to select deep. So what I'm going to do is select this darker purple here. And for the stroke, we're going to leave that the same. But what we're going to do is select both of them and make sure that our move tool is selected. We can hit V on the keyboard to accomplish that. And I'm going to use the arrow keys on the keyboard to kind of move this down and over. Now, how much you do is going to depend on really the thickness of your font. Like this is kind of thin, so I don't want to have too much of an extrusion. Because if we did this, just for demonstration purposes, that looks silly. You know, it might look good over here, but look at these letters. They look like crap. You can't read them. So let's bring that back up and over and just find a good spot for it to live in. Now, since all of these effects are basically reading from the same composition, if we go into here and change anything, it will automatically update here. So now we're going to add another effect to make it look like it's hand-drawn. So let's go to New, Adjustment Layer, and we'll call this Wiggles. Yeah, I like to call it Wiggles. All right, so what we want to do for this, we can add a Turbulent Displace. Again, that's under Distort, Turbulent Displace. Let's add that on top of our Wiggles. And I'm going to turn down the size to about maybe 25. And the amount, we're going to turn that down as well. So it's going to be kind of subtle. So what we're going to animate is this evolution. Now, if I take this slider and move it around, you can see that it's got a lot of wobble to it. That's cool. That's what we want. All right, so for the evolution, we're going to Alt-click on the stopwatch. That'll bring up this text box where we can add our expression. And we're going to do time spelled correctly. And we're going to do an asterisk, which means times or multiplied by, and we're going to do a big number, 1500. All right, so that's our first turbulent displacement. Now let's duplicate that. In here, we're going to make sure that this is selected and hit Command D to duplicate it. And we're going to turn the size down, something like maybe 10. And we'll turn the amount up just a little bit, like 15. That's fine. And the evolution, we're going to leave at 1500. Now, if I play this back real quick, you can see that we got this nice wobble. Now, to make it look a little more hand-drawn, what we're going to do is add a posterized time. Posterized time, that's under time, posterized time. Let's add that below our Turbulent Displace 2. Now, this is going to change the frame rate. Right now, our composition is set to 23.976, which is basically 24 frames per second. Now, if we take this and make it 12, now this is going to be represented as 12 frames per second. And all this to say is that basically what we're creating is more of a hand-drawn look. Alright, so that basically brings us to the end of the episode. Now, if you like what you saw and you learned from it, hit that like button, subscribe, do the things, the bell and all notifications, do all that stuff. Leave a comment. What do you want to see? What do you want to see? Tell me. I want to know. Alright, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.